Let's start from the start. It's fitting how the first game released for the Nintendo 64 was also the one game that defines it the most. Before 1996, there was nothing really at the scale of Mario 64. Sure, there were 3D games before it, even games on home consoles like Star Fox and Virtua Racing, but there was nothing like Mario 64. And even afterwards, in other ways, there's still nothing really like Mario 64. There are so few inhibitions as to what direction you can take or what you can explore, which is something not new today, but back then it hadn't happened that way in that form on a console. One thing that always sticks out is the way you don't ever have a time limit in a level. You're free to explore as much as you want for as long as you want. And everything can be explored, at least it seems, and there are little secrets and quirks everywhere, from the front yard to the courtyard to every corridor and level of the castle. The castle might be the most important aspect of this game. It gives the game so much personality and really differentiates it, and I've never seen any hub quite like the castle since. This may have been gaming's most important step into the future, and it featured gaming's most notable icon who, again going back to the perspective of 1996, hadn't started in a big console adventure since Super Mario World in 1991. It could have crippled Nintendo because they allegedly designed the controller around Mario 64 and put all of their weight in the new console behind Mario. But what ended up being made was nearly perfect for the time, and it pushed the medium itself into a new direction, out of the side-scrolling 2D world and into the third dimension, setting a standard for the next generation and every generation to follow. That's not to say it's perfect though. I'm sure the game's many problems were somewhat masked back when the game was brand new. But now, they can't hide. The platforming is a little sloppy because the jumping is just so imprecise, and that's probably my biggest issue with the game. Everything is just a little off, evidenced especially in the camera control, which really doesn't work perfectly anymore. It moves around too much without the player's control, and it just feels a little loose today. But that's what happens with anything. What was great in 1996 doesn't always hold up in 2014. Like Independence Day, which hinged on logic that we know doesn't make sense now. Or Detlef Schrempf, who was an all-star in 1995, but I wouldn't put money on him against Chris Bosch today. Flaws become more evident over time, so there's no surprise that that happened to Mario 64. Now, looseness certainly hurts in terms of gameplay, but when you take a loose approach to setting up the game's atmosphere, it doesn't necessarily hurt. There's so much in the game that makes it unique. There's so many little quirks that were inserted, some of them just Easter eggs, some of them just little details, like that sign in the top floor that says "Walk quietly," that weird sign in the courtyard fountain that led to all that discussion on whether or not Luigi was present in the game, that 8-part game facts thread with all those weird backward long jump glitches and beating the game with 16, then 1, then 0 stars, and I don't think there's been a game with so much unintentionally weird stuff since then. I don't know that we'll ever see anything with such a unique personality, or just so much personality ever again. Now, I noticed after going over this essay a few times that I never really talk about the quality of Super Mario 64 as a game in any positive light. Maybe it's because of how much the game represented to the industry, but everything it does well doesn't feel quite as notable anymore. I feel like I have to say it's a good game out of obligation. It's not emphatic like it used to be. You can ask anyone who saw me play it last year. Generally they could tell I didn't have a good time with it.
It was like watching somebody slowly realize that their favorite uncle was actually a drug dealer.
I will say this though, the level design is excellent, especially on the boss levels, and the creativity you can show in traversing the levels feels wonderful. Simply in terms of control, though, it's hard to speak positively about it.